Action!
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Grudge Report, where we talk about the Expanse. Today we're going to be talking about the season finale of season 5. It's episode 10 of the season. It's called Nemesis Games. We are going to spoil the heck out of it. So I'm Margaret, Reeb, as usual, your host for the Grudge Report on the Expanse. I work at the SETI Institute. And also, as usual, I am joined by Franck Marchis, who is a senior astronomer at the SETI Institute and Chief Science Officer at Unistellar. So we're super excited to get into this episode today, but I want to give you my spoiler warning. If you aren't caught up on the Expanse, definitely watch the episodes, all of season 5, because we're going to talk about all of it, and come back and join us for this discussion. It's a great episode. I won't say more, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to go away. And if you're still with us, welcome to this discussion. We're excited to get into the details. Franck, tell me your thoughts on this episode. To me, it was kind of broken into two parts, where the first part was the rescue of Naomi and the fallout from that. And then the second part was more of the conflict with Marco and setting up season 6. So what did you think overall of the episode?
Well, I will say that this episode is so intense that it should have been 2 episodes. Frankly, just the saving of Naomi and the death of Alex, it's one story by itself. And then the arrival on the moon and what's happening then with the Martian and the Belters and the Free Navy in Marcos should be another episode, because it's so intense. There's so many things happening that I'm not sure I understood everything, frankly.
And there was a lot to unpack.
Yeah, I did not read anything yet, because we record this the day after, and I was counting on you to tell me the story and to tell me what you understood. But I think we're gonna talk about that. It's gonna be a longer.
Let's see if we can understand it together. And as always, book readers, people who have eagle eyes when you watch the show, let us know what we get wrong, what we missed, because I know there will be plenty in my takeaways from the episode. Yeah, I've also decided.
We should remind
I'm going to read the books.
We did not read the books. So
no, we didn't. I'm going to go back and read them, but we don't have the context of the books, right, Franck? So I think we're missing a lot of details that the books include. So, yes. So let's talk about Naomi's rescue. I'm sure there's a lot of science to unpack there, but I think that it's set up by Holden kind of being a distraction for the Belters, for Kamina's fleet, because they've been sent to destroy the Rocinante, while the Screamin' Firehawk, I can't remember if that's its name right now or if they gave it another name to hide, but Alex and Bobby on their ship, they're going to get Naomi. So we have these kind of two things happening at the same time. I have to give a shout out to my girl, Kamina Drummer, because she did what we were all expecting. She turns on Marco. She kills his plant on the ship, whose name is escaping me right now, and she helps Holden. And that is how that particular conflict comes to an end. And then we see Naomi, and we've kind of figured out what she's doing, at least part of her plan, right, Franck? Yeah, finally. So it seems like she is putting the ship that she's on, which is a trap, into an odd spin to make it very hard for another ship to dock with it, because she knows that Alex and Bobby are coming for her, right? That's a pretty good explanation of what's happening.
Yeah, I think that's the explanation. So the spaceship, Chesemoka? Yeah, it's basically an empty spaceship. There's only an area where she could live, and then there is no control. She basically lost complete control. So it's probably going in straight line in a direction decided at the beginning of when they launched it, basically. And she's, since she knows that they are coming to save her, and the ship is about to blow up, she decides to put in a configuration which will make very difficult for them to come close to her. And she has no control. She decides, she found a very smart way to do it. And again, she surprised us because she's very smart. You remember we were mentioning there was some water, and she was looking at water on
Right.
the. So she probably found out that there was somewhere in this area, which is not habitable, this area where there is no atmosphere, there is a pipe, and this pipe is an ejection pipe for water. And she spent a lot of her time, apparently, trying to open this pipe to escape this water. And this has an impact because since the spaceship is going in straight line, when the water is escaping at high velocity, the spaceship, because of the third Newton law, action and reaction, this creates a new force and the spacecraft start spiraling. And here there is a lot to say about that. So first of all, she's using what we call a water rocket. Have you done a water rocket when you were a kid?
I have not done a water rocket, no, but I might, right? After you explain it to me.
Yeah. So it's water rockets are made by teenagers to learn about this, how we can send a rocket with just water. So what is basically you pressurize water into a bottle, and then you open the valve, and because of the water escape quickly the rocket, and the rocket start flying, taking off and flying into space in the atmosphere. And that's using
maybe not quite that far, but
yeah, it can go some of them went very far. There is a Guinness record of the highest rocket, water rocket. I don't have the record here, but I will find it and put the number somewhere on this.
And put it up in the show.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the water is forced out by the pressurized water, the compressed air, and that's using a very simple principle, the Newton third law of motion, which is basically what we use as a rocket engine as well when you burn gas or when you accelerate particles. That's the way we move a rocket. And she's using that technology, very primitive technology from the 21st century, to deflect the spacecraft and move it to another trajectory. And it starts spinning continuously.
So the ship itself is not powered by water, but she manages to open up a pipe, right, and use that force to send it into a spin.
So then after there is a complication of why they cannot board this spaceship. Here there is a lot of science as well, and maybe you should first tell the story. What happened with the Razorback?
So they're approaching, and they see some of the water being expelled. And Bobby seems to think that there might be something going on, and Alex thinks that it's a malfunction. And they have a discussion about exactly what we're talking about how dangerous it is and how difficult it is to dock with a ship that's in a spin like this. And so Alex decides to do a high G maneuver to line them up as best as they can be lined up. And that is where things get tricky. Yeah.
So the reason they have to get into this IG maneuver is because the spaceship is spinning quickly around the center. So it's there is probably some acceleration produced by that. So they have to mimic this motion to be able to come close to the spaceship and connect the two spaceships with this. They call this kind of tunnel that we have seen previously.
The boarding tunnel that they put between ships, right?
And remember, as soon they're gonna put the two spaceship together, right? What's going to happen is because of conservation of momentum, they're gonna start spinning even faster. Because it's like the same principle that when you have an ice skater. If you start rotating with arms extended, you're slow. But when you start putting your arms closer to your body, because you reduce you reduce the distance, you basically increase the speed, the angular speed. L equal I times omega. That's the expression of the angular momentum. And I will put a link. I'll look a very interesting class from the Khan Academy, which basically explained exactly that. So coming closer to each other like that, spin them up. So it's even going to be worse if they don't have a control. And she say, Bobby say, we have a broken. Something was broken. The maneuver thruster is broken on the Razorback. So they cannot basically compensate this acceleration like they would have done normally. And I think that's the fact. That's the reason she expects this to be kind of impossible.
Yeah, to be terrible. And then anything else on that? Because there's something that prevents them from even having to deal with this.
No, and then we have Naomi space jump, another one.
Yes, Naomi, they talk about all this. They discuss it. Alex ready to do it, and Naomi jumps out of the ship because in her last ditch attempt to prevent her friends from getting close to this ticking time bomb, she jumps out of the ship into space. She's in a suit. Though it's unclear if the suit is made. I mean, she's using it in the vacuum inside the ship, but it's probably not an important detail, but I don't know if this, it seems like it's a suit that's built for being in a vacuum, but it's in not great condition.
No. So she jumps. There is no oxygen in it.
There's no oxygen.
So she basically, once again, has to survive from the oxygen she carried in the suit when she closed. Which is,
she spun herself through the radar.
What's going to happen after like 40 seconds? She will die of carbon dioxide poisoning, based on our previous calculation. So
yes,
she doesn't have much time to stay in space like that, and she's hoping something. But while she's hoping them to come to rescue her, she has this. She moves her arms and the legs in a very weird. When I saw the show, what is she doing? And then they explain it's an emergency signal.
Yes, belter emergency signals, which they've probably talked about it in the show before, but I don't remember it. However, it makes sense because the belters live and work in the outer solar system. So it would make sense for the society to have created signals that they can communicate with in space, in the vacuum of space. When they maybe don't have comms or comms are broken, it makes sense narratively and in this world. So she's signaling, and Alex understands that she's signaling.
Yeah, because you cannot scream in space because nobody will hear you screaming. Remember? So, and she has no other way. She has no. I look. There is a field on Earth where we have distress signals, and multiple way of doing distress signal is in sailing. So in sailing, if you have a radio, you can say Mayday, Mayday. If you have access to Morse code artifact, you do the SOS, which is by flashing lights or by sound. If you have access to a distress rocket, you launch it. There is plenty. I'm looking at the list here. There is a long list of way of saying, hey, I'm in trouble. Some are very cool. Firing a gun or another explosive, or flying the international maritime signal flags, which are very weird flags. You can put that on your boat.
With symbols.
Yeah. There's a sign you can do with your body. I forgot what it is. Things like that or like this. I forgot. There is a sign from far away you can explain. So I think this is kind of related a bit. They are the exploration of space, and that's the reason they use the same term. They use the Navy fleet, remember?
Right.
It's because there is a kind of similarities between space exploration and ocean exploration in the 18th century.
Yeah, being out in this big unknown that you have to navigate, and it can be quite dangerous. Yeah, it's very interesting.
And then they try to reach her. And the problem is that she's very close to the spaceship, because when she jumped, remember when you jump, all the science we talk about the show come back in this one. That's why we're going to be speaking for more than 30 minutes, I think, on this one. When you jump is the acceleration that you use with your legs, which lasts 0.5 seconds typically, that give you the velocity. And as soon as you're in space, you basically keep the same velocity. So you
can't speed up.
But by pushing with your legs, you don't go that far. that fast. 50 kilometers per hour, I think I calculated last time. So after a few minutes, she's still very close to the spacecraft. So we have a spacecraft spinning, and there is a tiny body spinning at the same time close to the spacecraft, very close. So the Razorback cannot come close.
The Razorback?
Yeah. It cannot come close to her because it's risky. It's a risky configuration. We have a big spacecraft, a tiny person, and another.
They don't want a bumper. That would not be good.
Yeah. So what they decide to do is to launch.
Well, it's shot in a wonderful way. I loved the way that they shot this, and I'm not the first person to say this. I won't be the last. It's in a lot of the articles that have come out. But you get a shot of Naomi suffocating. She's struggling to breathe. She's in space. You see the darkness of space. It's a close-up of her. She's upset. She's apologizing to Alex for a name she called him, and she's, in distress. And then all of a sudden you hear this muffled, you hear Bobby's muffled voice to mimic sort of, I suppose, what Naomi may hear when Bobby, who is in her Martian suit, I'm imagining, or I think it's called the Goliath, it just went out into space to grab her. So Bobby grabs Naomi and she gives her an infusion of oxygen, and then she brings her back to the Razorback. So that scene is one of my favorites of the episode. Yeah, it's a great scene. But they talk about many of the things that you mentioned in the last episode, Naomi's condition. They say she's hypoxic, she's dehydrated, and she also has radiation burns, which is something that Freya commented on one of our last episodes when we were talking about symptoms of being in a vacuum, like space. We didn't mention radiation burns. So can you explain a little bit more? I'm guessing it's because when she jumped without a suit, there's no protection from the radiation of space. Is that what gave her the burns?
Yeah. So space is not an hospitable place because of the lack of oxygen, the lack of atmosphere, but also because we have something gigantic in our solar system called the sun, which is very useful for us because it provides energy and help growing plants and so on. But the sun is not very selective in the amount of energy it sends to us. So the sun can also send some very damaging radiation for biological species. And very simple example is UV light. If you are in space, you're outside of the protection of the ozone layers above Earth, which is thin layers that protect us from UVB radiation. So you basically receive those UV light, which are high energy light, more energetic than the blue. That's why we call them ultraviolet, UV. And they have the potential of destroying molecules directly by impacting them. So what you see is the burn, basically. So the radiation burn that you see on the face is probably coming from UV light and even more energetic radiation, because the sun also expels some high velocity particles like electrons and protons or neutrons, and they also interact with molecules and atoms at the atomic levels, destroying the cohesion between those molecules. So there is a lot of interaction here coming from the sun that could affect biological species. That's one of the reasons we have an ozone layer, and that's one of the reasons we can live on Earth now. Probably in the past, when the ozone layers was not surrounding our planet, most species had to live in the ocean, protected from this radiation by the water of the ocean. It's after the formation of the ozone layers that life came on the surface of the planet.
Yes, and it's a reason why we need to protect our atmosphere and ozone layer.
And it's a very thin layer. It's amazing how thin this is. And you remember in the 80s, the ozone layer was being destroyed by the CFC gas that you could find into our fridges at the time. And we had to ban those completely to finally close and reduce this ozone hole that we could see on the Antarctic. It's amazing how our technology has an impact on the what has been on our planet for millions of years, or billion in the case of the ozone layer. Just with our technology, we can destroy this equilibrium, this life equilibrium that basically has been useful for the species and for us as well.
Yes, yeah. It's a very precarious situation. It feels permanent, but it's not necessarily permanent. We're at an equilibrium that we would like to keep for sure.
So
because
if you look at the
radiation burns look terrible.
If you look at the spacewalk modern time now, you will notice, if you look them for a long period of time, there is channel now where they show them continuously in live, that when the astronauts are in space, when they're in the dark area, we can see their face, but when they are going into the sunny area, when the International Space Station is illuminated by the sun, they close something in front of their face, which is a color of gold, to protect them from those radiation, protect their eyes specifically, because they're very sensitive to radiation as well.
Yeah. Interesting. I didn't know that. It's fact. That's very.
So she doesn't have that.
Cool and important.
Yeah. So
she doesn't, but Bobby gets her.
Yeah. So this 5-second scene, which is beautiful as ton of science. You mentioned that we hear her muffling. Why? Because she's speaking to her by being close to her. The radiation, the sun is going through the spacecraft. Basically, she comes close to her and she touches her. You hear the impact, and then you can hear her. If there was no impact, there was no connection between the two spacesuits, she will not be able to speak to her. That's one thing.
That's why it's completely silent until you hear the impact and you hear Bobby speaking, because it's more like the vibrations, I suppose, between them than it is anything else.
And then remember that Naomi jumped from a spaceship which is spinning, so she's also spinning as much.
Yes.
So Bobby managed to stabilize her spin first.
Because you can hear her suit, right?
Yeah. And then after she has stabilized a spin, she can start moving her toward the Razorback slowly. And there is the scene when she's holding her, and you can see the jets in the back of her spacesuit.
And that spacesuit is using the same force, probably not the same material, as Naomi was using when she ejected the water, right?
In space, everything is about action-reaction. And it could be gas, it could be, as I say, particles, it could be the technology used in the Epstein drive, which I don't really know about, but that's always by ejecting something that you move toward you create a reaction force, and that's moving you toward the direction you want to go.
And then we learn about a crew member's death that happens while off screen, I suppose you could say. It's when Bobby is rescuing Naomi. She calls back to Alex and he doesn't respond, and then we see a shot of him in the pilot seat bleeding from his nose, and we learn that he had a massive stroke because of the high G maneuver, which is something that has been talked about a lot in the show. So for those of you that follow the news, we knew that Alex was going to be written off the show because there have been allegations against the actor, and there's been a lot of chatter about how this character would be written off or die, because I believe I know Alex is still alive in the books. So the showrunners and the writers sort of could make their own decision, and I think this was a good decision because it builds on what we know about the world.
Yeah, they make this character disappear in a smart way. I mean, they mentioned multiple times, apparently, in the previous episode, in the previous seasons, that those IG maneuvers are dangerous, especially when they inject some kind of fluids into the body of people. So that's a reaction after maybe having multiple of them or being in space for a long period of time. They say it's a risk that you know you will take, and it could happen.
Anything about the first part of this episode before we talk about the second part, Franck?
Before we talk about the second episode? No, I think
the second episode, part 2 in your mind. I would have loved 2-hour season finale because there is a lot here. So after this reunion, bittersweet reunion, drummer, we never see her again. She goes off probably to do her belter thing. And then we do see the Rocinante because they go back to Luna to reunite with Amos, who has made it to Luna with his ragtag group of people from Earth. They reunite, and then Clarissa, it's very interesting to see how Amos talks Holden into being okay with Clarissa joining their crew, but that happens. And then they have a very nice happy hour on Luna to celebrate everybody being reunited. It's very lovely. Avasarala says some kind words about how Belters and Martians and Earthers should all love each other. And then, because we can't have happy moments in this show, they all get called away from the happy hour because something is happening on the ring, or near the ring gates, I should say. And we come to find out that Marco his plan is coming to fruition, where Marco, backed up by the renegade Martian fleet, attacks the UN and loyal Martian ships guarding one ring to go to. I'm not sure if it's multiple rings, but it's definitely the ring to go to Laconia, which is a planet in a distant part of space. So what science do you want to start dissecting first, Franck? Because there's a lot going on here.
When you say that they interrupted by what's going on, in fact, they interrupted by what happened in the past tense.
That's right, because I loved... Yes, and they talk about it, because Avasarala asks, what's the comms delay? And I believe they say 3 hours. My ears perked up because I thought, okay, we're finally kind of seeing... I'm sure we've seen it before, but this is a very interesting way to showcase that things are happening really far apart, right, in space. So they're getting the live feed of what's happened. 3 hours.
3 hours. That's remember they're communicating using radio, in fact, some kind of lasers, right? It's a very realistic show. Again, that's the reason we like to talk about the science. So 3 hours, that's correspond to roughly 22 astronomical unit. 22 times the distance between Earth and the Sun. The distance in light minute between Earth and the Sun is 8 minutes roughly. Okay, so you can make the calculation. So 20 times 22 AU. That's the way we call it in when we do conferences, which we always call it AU. That's the distance of let's say the planet Neptune is 30 AU from the Sun, so 29 AU from us. So it's this ring, based on the assumption that is a 3 hour delay, is basically close to Neptune. It's inside the orbit of Neptune, if the configuration is correct. Yeah, I will say that. So that's the first science fact that I liked. And I really, would like to emphasize the fact that the show is always trying to be very accurate with the gravity, with the communication. And I really love that. There is one thing we forgot to mention about when the Naomi start the spinning, and I'm just going to put this quickly, is that there is a helmet nearby her, and the helmet start moving, drifting away, is because by changing the acceleration, she basically changed the gravity on the spaceship, and this moved the furnitures and moved this helmet. And there is a lot of stuff like this that I love in the show, and that's this conversation about the fact that it's a 3 hour delay. It's something that's realistic that we will have when we will start exploring the solar system. We will have a delay, and we will know what happened. We will not know live what's happening.
Well, we know, and the way, a topical way that we'll kind of see this play out is when Perseverance lands on Mars, right? Because there's a delay. I think it's like 8 minutes or something. So every signal that we're getting is 8 minutes old, right? Things have already happened with the rover. We just don't know because of the communications delay, right? But
That's the
over
reason
longer,
everything, most of the landing like this are completely automatic, and they're made by those robots and the sensors. So there is a risk, of course, because we basically rely on the computer and sensors to land. I think it's $2 billion rovers on Mars.
yeah, because we can't send it real-time controls, right? Exactly. I mean, it's just they would be 8 minutes late for whatever's going on. It's interesting and scary and exciting. So yes, there is a comms delay. So essentially, they're just watching a video replay of this battle, and their ship's getting destroyed. And there's this sad moment where they see the Free Navy ships blowing up the patrol of the ring gates, and then they see the Martian ships arrive, and everybody cheers for a moment, and then the Martian ships start firing at the UN and loyal Martian ships, and they realize that this is sort of the culmination of the subplot that Bobby and Alex were chasing for a while, of a band of Martians selling and buying and doing some dark deals of technology with Marco in exchange, we believe, for the protomolecule. So this is sort of the end result of that. And there's a transmission between Marco and Salvatore, who is I'm not going to remember his rank, but he's ranked Admiral. Very high in the Admiral. He's an Admiral.
He betray people, so I don't think he's an Admiral anymore. We call that a dictator.
No, in his own heart, he's a dictator. So he's even higher than an admiral. But he and Marco are clearly in cahoots. They have a video communication. And what I have gleaned from this conversation is that Salvatore and his group of Martians want to create a society on Laconia. And so they have worked with Marco to get control of the gate and get control of the planet on the other side, Laconia. And in exchange, they backed up Marco. And I don't think Marco's plan is completely done, but this was clearly a key component of it. And so the Marchis, which is the ship that Salvatore is on with his Lieutenant Babbage, they have a conversation about what kind of military utopia they want to create on Laconia. And then when they're going through the ring gate, something interesting happens. I think that they've disintegrated and they've died, but I'm sure book readers know, don't spoil it, but it's kind of unclear in the show, right, Franck?
Yeah, I don't think they died.
You don't think they died? You're just saying that because I think they died. No. you
Yeah, so
don't think they died.
Here there is not much science per se, but there is a lot of the story itself. So
yes.
Yeah, no, this alliance between Marco and the Martian, and I will emphasize that we should not say that it's an alliance between Marco and the Martian, because it's Marco and Salvatore. It's a rogue Martian. So what I understand from the show is that on Mars was a society which gave a lot of power to its military. It's clear. A lot of power, I mean also a lot of budget, a very large part of the budget of Mars was for defense and military people in general. So what Salvatore did, he basically did a coup. He blew up the entire parliament, killing the most representative of the semi-democratic system they had. And then he basically decided to become take the helm of the Martian future. And as all dictators that take the leadership like this, like Marco has, he has a little bit, some great idea about himself. And he gave us this amazing speech in the spacecraft after talking, when the two dictators or the two terrorists, whoever you want to call them, talk to each other. It's exactly the way I could imagine two terrorist dictators talking to each other. Basically, they all congratulate each other about the amazing plan they have for the future
victory
of humanity and the victory. You have your planetary system, we have something like this. They say Marco he claims that he will have now the Earth, Sun, the solar system as his own planetary system, while Salvatore will have Laconia planet and all the other planet as his planetary system. And because two dictators can never work close to each other, as you probably know by looking at looking at the history of our own planet, they always end up by betraying each other or killing each other. They decide that was an agreement, but that's all. Now we're gonna put mine on our each side of our rings, so nobody else can come and without without acknowledging. So you will not be able to come to see us, and I will not be able to come to see you. Basically,
exactly. Their alliance is done because they've gotten what they need from each other.
Just a convenient alliance. Exactly. So that's the first part, the political part. The second part is the protomolecule. So what happened with this protomolecule? You remember? Probably. Tell me your version, and then I'm gonna take mine.
Yes, and then correct me. So in the mid-season, I would say a couple episodes ago, there's all that terrible stuff that happened on Tycho where Fred Johnson dies and the Belters come to get his sample of the protomolecule. And it is extracted from Fred Johnson's quarters and put on a ship called the Zemea. And then the Zemea flies away from Tycho Station to its destination unknown. Holden gets a hold of the flight pattern. I believe from Monica, there's somehow they understand the ship and they can trace it in space. So they all get on the Rocinante, they go after the Zemea. But when they get close to the Zemea, it self-destructs seemingly. It explodes. And Monica, who is the journalist and documentarian that's sort of been attached to the Rocinante for a while, for the past couple of episodes, it seems, she's been studying the torpedoes and the explosion pattern of the Zemea. She even pulls Bobby aside in this episode and says, you know a lot about missiles and stuff, which I thought was funny. Look at this and tell me, does something seem off? It seems off to me. And Bobby, it seems like off screen they have some conversations. Monica does some more math, and she realizes that one of the torpedoes or something got away. And so we're led to believe that, sure, the Zemea blew up, but the protomolecule was likely on this torpedo, and the Martian ship, or I should say the rogue Martians, the Barkeith or somebody aligned with the Barkeith, probably picked it up, because that seems to be the exchange between Marco and the rogue Martians, is the rogue Martians will lend them military power and technology if they get if Marco will procure the protomolecule. So that's kind of been a hanging thread of what happened with the Zemea. Where's the protomolecule? Is it gone? Is it not gone? Seems like it was on that torpedo, and it's not gone. It's with the rogue Martians now. So that is my interpretation of what has happened.
I have the same one.
Good. Okay, great. But it's not clear, at least if there's some indication. I didn't pick up on it in the show, but I think it's on the Barkeith, which is what I think something happened with the protomolecule. You know?
No, because I listened to the
conversation. Tell me how you disagree. Okay.
I listened to the conversation carefully toward the end.
Okay.
After having his great speech with the terrorist Marco, terrorist Sauveteur has a conversation with Cortázar, who seems to be a scientist already located on Laconia, the planet Laconia, which seems to be habitable apparently. And and Cortázar is extremely excited because he says the protomolecule works or something like that. We use it, and something happened. It seems to have activated what they wanted, and they're going to enter in the third phase pretty soon. And the structures are stable. We don't know much, but I have the feeling that he had already sent the protomolecule to Laconia, to this guy, the scientist, who has been activated the technology, this alien technology, using the protomolecule that he had received from the Zemea. And we are going to know in the next season why this technology is about. And we see some picture of it, right? It doesn't make any sense.
It's in orbit around the planet, right?
It seems to be, it's not pyramidal. There is not only pyramids like on Helus, but there seems to be some structures in the atmosphere or in orbit around the planet. And that's what I think they're activating.
Well, I'm going to amend what I think has happened, because I think it has something to do with the protomolecule. Maybe it's not. Maybe the Barkeith isn't holding on to the protomolecule, but maybe the alien structures that it seems to me like defense. Why would you put anything in orbit? I don't know. It seems like it's for defense. So maybe by turning on that alien technology, they turned on some defense mechanism, because we know not much, but we know that the society that created the protomolecule and the ring gates was wiped out by some unknown mysterious force. At least that's what I picked up from the show. Book people, tell me if I'm wrong. So there's some sort of old battle that is happening, or maybe it's no longer happening, but the remnants are still there. It does seem like that's interplaying somehow, and I think that's going to come up in the 6th season. So it would make sense that we're left with this mystery that's somehow related to that conflict.
We will see. Season 6. When is it out?
You don't disagree? I don't know when it's out. I haven't looked, but there's one more thing I just want to mention, which is that I loved the one little scene we get of Philip. He's loading a gun, and then he has this very neutral reaction to the fact that his mom got away, the Rocinante got away, or that they didn't destroy the Rocinante and Holden. And Philip he's very almost
rational.
Like he's it's almost like he's I want to say psychopath. I don't know if that's true, but he just doesn't have an emotion.
Like Amos, I would say.
Yes, yeah, he just lacks. Well, I mean, psychopathy. We don't want to get into the definition of that, but he doesn't have an emotional reaction. He's very cool and calculated. But I believe it's the Chekhov's gun idea in storytelling, where if there's a loaded gun, at some point it needs to be used. And so to me, Philip is that sort of like loaded gun, ticking time bomb. I'm curious to see what he's going to do in season 6. I thought he might do something this season, but he hasn't. So
from this scene, I think Marco congratulates him for his reaction. But in fact, I think Marco kind of surprised by the reaction of his son, and the fact that he's so rational. And I think that's the time where the son will basically take over and decide that he's not going to be driven by the emotion like his father, but being driven by rational thinking. And I hope that's what's going to happen for the next season. Will we see?
Yeah, it was I was worried about Marco's reaction, but that was probably the scariest reaction he could have had, which is encouraging his son to not feel. I don't know. But yes, we'll see in the next season.
So I have one thing I wanted to say too.
Okay. What's your parting thought, Franck?
I like this tiny moment where, and I forgot his name, the pilot of the Rocinante called Belters the skinnies, and Holden is upset about it. He said, "Do not use this term or this word in front of me anymore." So first, the Belters are being called skinnies by the Earther because probably since they lost their muscular mass and their bones by living into low gravity, so they don't need to have these legs and so on. They just probably are very skinny naturally. And that's become a derogative name used by Earther to describe them. And the reason Holden is so upset about it, it's because his girlfriend is a Belter. So he kind of finally relate to it. He's not an Earther like who basically is being on his planet and heard about how bad are those Belters, so Martians, and use derogative name to call them. He's been in space, he has been there, he has been talking to Belters, and he realized that they are like him. They're less different than they expect on Earth, and using derogative names like this, words like this to describe them is not appropriate because they're human beings. So this is a very nice scene, I think, and it reminds me a lot of what's going on in our own planet at the moment in our society, where people are trying to avoid using derogative terms to describe other people, from citizenship to races and so on, because we want to remind people that ultimately, if you're born in China, if you're born in Africa, you are a human being like us and everybody. And using those terms to divide us doesn't help. And I really love this scene.
Yes, I like the message of the show of uniting people despite differences and, prejudices that you've been taught about different factions. At the end of the day, everybody's a human being and can't survive in a space vacuum. So we should all be nice to each other. Yes, I thought that was good. And especially, I mean, Naomi is a Belter and he's dating Naomi, but also they've been separated this entire season and she's like almost died. So having Bull say skinny at that moment was probably not a good choice on his part. Right? Things aren't going super well for the crew at that moment.
So maybe we should talk about the next step for us.
Sure. What's the next step, Franck?
We did not prepare that, so it's completely live here.
I'm going to go back and watch the season with Illis because I think that we're going to see Laconia, which I very much hope, because I love the concept of the rings and the other planets. And so I'm going to go back and rewatch that season just to prepare. But what are you going to do, Franck?
Yeah, I think this season 5 did not talk much about the rings. In fact, they're completely inexistent in the show. So season 6 will probably focus on the rings and Laconia. I'm very tempted to read the books. And I know I don't have much time, but I think it's time. It's time to do it. So I will probably spend the next 6 months before the release of season 6 to read the books and to kind of enjoy the background stories, which are, I think, as interesting. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And maybe we can do a prediction episode. Us?
Yeah. Are we going to do another show on another science fiction? Anything you want?
I would love to. Yeah. I mean, if anybody has recommendations, put them in the comments, or we can cut this out of what we put on YouTube. But yeah, I'd love to. I mean, we can also discuss the Illis season. I don't know if people would find that interesting, but I'm also planning on reading the books. Probably won't start with the first one, but start with kind of where we are in the story, because I love this idea of a new planet, an exoplanet somewhere that's habitable, and there's an ancient alien society, and I want to know more about that. So I'll probably read that book.
Right. So if people watching this should really tell us what they would like us to do, and we will read you, we will listen to you, and decide in the next week. Next week's what we're gonna do.
Yes. We can do a science review of Battlefield Earth, which is, have you seen that movie, Franck?
No. Which one is that? Is the one with the insects?
No. Oh my gosh. I don't want to. It's got John Travolta and Forrest Whitaker, and it's like one of the worst movies ever made, which makes it great.
No, what we could do that when there is a new episode, a new science fiction movie, we can do a Grudge report on a new science fiction movie, or maybe a new show or something. Let us know.
Yeah.
Let us know if you want to see us again on YouTube talking about.
Or if we should just meet and not record it and talk. But thank you to everybody who has watched our videos, left comments. We really appreciate it. We love talking about the Expanse and science. So thank you very much for tuning in. And I want to remind everybody that we are a product of the SETI Institute, which is a nonprofit research institution whose mission is to explore and understand the nature and origin of life in the universe, which leads to all sorts of interesting projects and research. So if you're interested in learning more about the SETI Institute or watching other videos on our channel, whether it's Grudge Report or some of the science lectures, take a look at the links below. There's plenty of stuff to spend lots of time learning and being entertained. And if you are so inclined, you can also make a donation. Like I said, we're a nonprofit research institution, so we rely on our generous donors. So if you're comfortable, if that's something of interest, the link is below as well. And we'll be back, hopefully, for the next season of The Expanse and maybe something new. So thank you, Franck, for doing all of your calculations and explaining the science of this awesome show.
Thank you very much, Margaret, for being so patient with me and listening to me ranting about science and correcting people and stuff. I appreciate it.
I love it.
Bye.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.